Hi there and welcome from Ventura, California to today's webinar, sponsored by vAuto and hosted by WebAttract, the leader in thought leadership webinars. I'm Lori Dearman, Senior Webinar Producer with WebAttract, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. And in just a moment, we'll be introducing Majd Saboura, a specialist in the wholesale sourcing market, for an interactive webinar to help you turn sourcing auction vehicles into a competitive advantage. You'll also have an opportunity to have your questions answered at the end of the presentation during the Ask the Experts panel session. Now, we've invited you along with a diverse audience of over 300 professionals registered across 48 states and provinces. Before today's webinar, we ask each of you to tell us a bit about what you'd like to learn, and many of you weighed in. Thank you for your input. I think you'll find that our speaker will address your requests throughout today's program. Today, you'll walk away with best practice insights to help you improve auction purchases to increase front-end gross, reduce the amount of time required to evaluate or source auction vehicles, and minimize auction mistakes that undermine used vehicle profitability. Before we get going, I do have our first interactive poll coming up on your screen. You should see the question. Has your auction sourcing process changed in the last 12 to 18 months? So in this one, we'd like you to go ahead and weigh in with just one response. We're going to more auctions than we used to. We're buying a few more cars online than we used to. We don't go to physical auctions. We only buy online, or our process really hasn't changed. All right, it looks like 15% saying we're going to more auctions than we used to, 31 saying we're buying a few more cars online, 26 saying we don't go to physical auctions, we only buy online, and 28% saying process hasn't really changed. And I find those results quite interesting, and they do seem to indicate a marketplace where change is prevalent, and that's absolutely relevant for today's topic. So thank you for weighing in on that. And at this point, with no further ado, please let me introduce our subject matter expert for today, a 9-year veteran of the automotive industry. Majd specializes in the wholesale market, where he has worked nationally and internationally, connecting buyers and sellers on behalf of Manheim. In his current role with vAuto, Majd leads wholesale business development for Stockwave, vAuto's wholesale sourcing innovation. Prior to Cox Automotive, Majd held international finance and revenue management positions for Manhattan Associates and Invesco. Majd earned a bachelor's degree in accounting from Kennesaw State University, and he currently lives with his family in Atlanta. Majd, warm welcome to you today. How are you?
I'm doing great, Lori. Thank you, and happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you as well. Majd, why don't you go ahead and get us started by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Lori. I've been in the wholesale world for a couple of years, but prior to vAuto, as Lori mentioned, working in international export. So part of that role, I really spent a lot of time understanding the domestic wholesale environment to understand what are the players, what are some of the factors that impact the marketplace, in essence to truly help leverage that information and share that across the whole world. And part of that really helped me was connecting the world with the wholesale market in the United States, as well as afforded me the opportunity to understand the international wholesale world as well. Prior to that, I've really spent a lot of time understanding financial impact internationally and domestically, working with different portfolio managers and having a pretty robust portfolio of assets under management. So based on that experience, I really believe that it has set me up to where I am today and really be able to help the domestic dealer today understand what's going on in the world today and how they can be prepared for the future.
And how does that fit into your role at vAuto currently?
Actually, it really has set me up to be able to understand truly what was going on in the with the dealership world. And one of the best parts of my job really with vAuto is talking to dealers every single day and really learning from them how are they doing business today, how are they changed from doing business previously in the past, whether it's been 6 months, been a year, or versus how they used to do business in just based on their history with their father or their grandfather. And part of that is understanding what are some of the pain points that they're experiencing in this world today. What are some of the factors that are impacting them to change their behavior if they have to, or if they haven't changed their behavior, what is the reason behind them, what are they doing that is so successful? And how are they, what are the key factors that they're doing? And in reality, some of one of the best part of that is really summarizing into how are they getting into the car. So the most important thing that I've learned from them is really the acquisition process. What is the most important thing for anything that they do is buying the cars right. And that entails a slew of things that follow it, making the right gross at the front, making sure they have a satisfied customer that comes back to their lot, or be able to go out there and buy another car so they can have a faster turn and be able to make more money. So it's really getting out of the gate strong is the most important thing for them. And that is one of the most important things that I've learned from them is how much time are they spending to try to achieve those goals. They're spending endless hours in truly researching and looking for these vehicles. And based on the poll that we just started off with, I'm really excited to see that a majority of the audience is really doing that as well. They're diversifying potentially, they're buying more online, they're expanding their research, they're attending more physical auctions or vice versa. They're not going and they're focusing more online. So it's really encouraging to see that the audience as well is on the same in the same boat as the dealers that I've been talking with, which hopefully some of them are on the call as well. And that really comes back to three major problems or three major areas of focus. It's really understanding what car to buy. And not only understanding what car to buy is where do you go get that car? Do you go to a physical auction? Do you go to a big box auction versus a small local auction around the corner? And the key to all of those factors is really understanding how much to pay for that vehicle. Because you want to understand how much you're getting into that vehicle so you can know how much money you're going to get out of it. But before I go into more detail into that aspect and going into why that is and how they solve these problems, it really comes down to having a solid game plan or a business plan. Is truly making sure that every single time you walk into an auction, you log into an online or simulcast or whatever it is understanding what is your game plan. And what I mean by that is really knowing why are you paying that much money for that vehicle? Why are you willing to buy this vehicle in a different location and be able to ship that car back to your lot? And is there a need from a customer perspective? Are they asking for that specific vehicle? Are they asking for a specific car or a model? And also knowing the most important thing is when to walk away. And that's all part of the game plan. So what I would like for today is really go through and help try to go with the best practices of what constitutes a game plan. But before I get into that, I would like to take a step back and really understand what's going on in the wholesale world today, what has happened in the past, where we are today in the present, and truly try to have some predictions as far as what the future might look like based on some of the analysts are predicting today and based on the trends that we've seen so far. So to start off with, we'd like to share some of the past history. So this chart represents the wholesale transactions that occurred in the past 10 plus years. And the most important thing to notice in this chart is that in 2015, based on the National Automotive Auction Association public numbers, these are true transactions that were sold through auctions in the United States. And they said they published the numbers about 9.3 million vehicles were sold through auctions in 2015. That represents about a 6% increase year over year. But the most important thing I wanted to point out is that we are seeing a climb back out from the 2008 recession that we've seen in 2009, and we're seeing we're going back to numbers that we've experienced back in 2003, 2004. And the prediction is that these numbers are going to continue to increase. So the wholesale market was fairly big in 2015, and it's going to continue to rise for the next coming years. And what some of the drivers as well that are occurring in the market today is the lease penetration. This chart shows the lease penetration for the first half of the year so far, and all the analysts are predicting that this is going to continue to increase. And one of the main reasons that we are seeing an increase in leasing is that new car prices today are a lot more expensive than they used to be in the past. I think Kelley Blue Book published a study that on average a brand new vehicle is about $34,000. So gone are the days where you can get into a new car though for $17,000, $18,000. And if you look at the high end of that range, if you look at full-size SUVs and crossovers, they're retailing for about $58,000 for a brand new vehicle versus a subcompact car is about $15,000. So as we all know, consumers are really focused on how much money they pay monthly for a car. So they are so focused on their payment rather than having an owner in the car. So they do want to drive that new car, but they can't afford it. So they're looking into leasing as an option, and that's why it's driving this increase in leasing. But we also know that all this new lease activity is going to result in these cars coming back into the market in 24 to 36 months. So there's going to be an influx of cars coming back into the market in the next coming years, and that's going to continue to grow, because we know new car production is on the rise. I believe in 2015 they had about 17.5 million new cars produced, and I don't think any of the OEMs is planning to slow down the next couple of years. So we are going to continue to see an increase in lease penetration as consumers are looking for a new car, but they really can't afford to buy it outright. Some of the indication as well is seeing some slowdown in July of this year. We've seen the lowest lease penetration, about 27.8%, which is the lowest since May of 2015. So it is starting to see some softness in the market, but what has been done already is that it started a trend of having a huge penetration of new cars that will come back at some point. But the prediction based on all this new lease penetration and this is resulting in a prediction of having close to 4 million cars coming back into the market over the next 3 years. This is to note that this is on top of the normal cycle. So 9.3 million was in 2015. That included about 2.55 million off-lease vehicles. But the prediction is that 3.1 million is going to come back on top of the 9.3 million. So these numbers are going to increase. So it's going to have a huge supply of newer, low mileage inventory coming back into the wholesale market. And truly is going to create some challenge for all of us to really find that right vehicle. And not only finding that right vehicle, but understanding how much to pay for that vehicle. So all that influx of cars coming back into the wholesale market is basic economics tells us that you have a huge supply of the same vehicles coming back into the market. That's really going to start driving the pricing down. And we have seen that in the first 6 months of this year, we've seen about 3.5% drop in the overall price of vehicles in the wholesale market. So vehicles, the pricing, so the dealers are able to buy these cars cheaper. And analysts are predicting that by the end of the year, they're going to see about a 6% total decline in wholesale prices. So, of course, we have a lot more cars coming into the market. That's going to drive pricing down because you have a lot more selection. And the resellers and the captive finance companies are going to have to get rid of these vehicles because their dealers cannot consume all these vehicles coming back into their lots. So as we all know, the franchise dealer always gets dibs on these off-lease vehicles coming back. But now they're going to have so many cars coming back that they're not going to be able to consume them on their lots and resell them to their consumers. So they're going to have to resort to the wholesale market in order to get rid of those vehicles. So if taking a look at the wholesale market, I really want to take a look at what's going on in retail as well. And one of the most important things that I wanted to show in retail is that there is a decline in trade-ins coming back to these franchise dealers. One of the biggest reasons, again, is this huge lease penetration, or this having a lot of cars coming back and leasing shows that people are not really owning these cars. But the most important thing I want to note is that if you look at new car production in 2008 and 2009, it was the lowest ever that we've experienced in the market. And those cars don't exist in the market today. So these dealers that are banking on having trade-ins to supply their used car lots are not going to have as much option in having a good trade-in coming back in, because these cars, these are 8 to 9 year old cars, don't exist. So they're going to have to resort to auctions, to wholesale, in order to replenish their inventory. So it's going to be much more, it's just going to be a fewer reliance on trade-ins and a greater reliance on auction units. What it also shows us is that there is an increase in CPO sales, which makes complete sense based on what I just shared with you earlier, is that consumers are so focused on their car payment and they can't really afford a new car payment. But some consumers don't like leasing or don't want to see leasing as an option. So they're reverting back to CPO sales because they can get a fairly new car, but they're also going to get the same warranties that they would get with a brand new car. So they're getting the same assurance that this car is guaranteed by the dealer or by the OEM. So they have a comfort level saying, I can't afford a brand new car. I don't want to lease. So my next option is a CPO. And we continue to see every single month CPO sales increasing and getting higher and higher. So that's showing that these dealers, every single dealer is going to be out there scooping up all these low-mile cars that are fairly new to be able to qualify for the CPO programs. And based on what is the prediction as far as what is the mix of used car inventory on the dealers' lots, we're seeing that they're stocking up more newer cars under 3 years old or with low mileage than they ever had before. And in Q1 2016, it was about 52% of their used inventory was 3 years and under. Again, it shows that the trend is moving away from the 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old vehicles, and you're having younger cars that are sitting on their lots. And 52%, I mean, that is the highest that we've ever seen, and it's going to continue to grow in the future as we see how things are going. So you would think with all this great increase in supply coming into the market, with this influx of new car production, with increased CPO sales and all the stuff, that dealers are making more money. Unfortunately, NADA has released a study that in the past 5 years there have been a 20% compression in margins. So even though there's more sales in the market, even though these dealers are selling more vehicles every single day, they're making less gross on the vehicle. So gone are the days when we used to make $2,000, $2,100 gross, and now we're closer to $1,500, an average maybe $1,700 front-end gross as the market is seeing. This chart is reflective of the same statistic that NADA published. This reflects the profits of the top 7 publicly traded dealership groups, and you can see that in past years they have seen a compression in their margin as well. They used to make an 11% profit, and now it's closer, and it's continuing to decline throughout these years. So we are definitely seeing a tightening of margins and how to make money on the front end of these vehicles. So if we take a step back and really summarize what we've learned so far from the wholesale and retail market, is that we're seeing 2 different trends. It's really seeing it's going to be much harder and much more challenging to truly find that vehicle that fits our portfolio, that fits our profile, that really is going to make us bring those customers to our lots. But not only is it hard to find that right vehicle, it's going to be even an increased demand that we maximize our front-end gross. It's becoming more important today than ever to truly understand what vehicles we're buying and how much money are we making off those vehicles, because that's what's really going to drive our profit margin. So at this point, I would like to take a step back and offer up another poll. So Lori, take it away, please.
Absolutely. Folks, coming up on your screen is that poll. Which of the following do you find most difficult as you source auction vehicles? Is it knowing the right cars to buy, spending too much time researching vehicles, losing too many cars to other bidders, paying too much to acquire vehicles? So it looks like we have 11% saying knowing the right cars, 14% spending too much time researching, 20% losing too many cars to other bidders, and 55% saying paying too much to acquire vehicles. Also have somebody put in previous history in the car on condition of car, not just year and model. That was one of the other options there. Majd, any thoughts on these responses?
Thank you, Lori. Actually, this is very interesting because this reflects that you guys are experiencing, which would make sense, like everybody else that we've talked to as well. It really summarizes it into 2 common complaints, in addition to what you guys have shared. It's finding the right car, and you are spot on. It is really becoming more and more difficult because you guys are experiencing that influx of cars coming through today, and it's going to continue to get harder. But even more importantly, paying or overpaying for a vehicle. So getting the car on the money is one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing today. And it really indicates one of the same things that I've been hearing from dealers is that dealers are spending a lot of hours really researching, going through run lists, researching cars, running vehicle history reports, condition reports, pictures, going to the auction to walk the lot on pre-sale and to look at the car to make sure that they're identifying the right vehicles. So they're spending hours, if not days, of research and on top of everything else that they have to do, on top of selling vehicles, being able to have satisfied customers. So they're spending a lot more time. So on average, I would say for every one car you're buying, you're at least looking at 10 cars to find that one car. And I wanted to share with you a quote that an independent dealer in Texas recently shared with me. And he was saying that buying cars at auction is really a form of legalized gambling. And the dealers who are the best at working the numbers will always win. I thought that was very interesting.
It is. And Maj, what I'm hearing you say is that there are a lot of cars on the market, yet it's tougher to buy cars on the money, which seems a bit ironic. Can you explain?
Yes, definitely, Lori. I mean, it's common sense. It really comes back to basic economics, as I mentioned, is the huge influx of supply coming back into the market. The decline in pricing is really creating a paradox in the market because dealers are excited to the pricing are going down, that they can buy this car today cheaper than they ever bought it in previous times. So they really want to go and get those cars. But what's really becoming more importantly is understanding which cars our markets are demanding, which cars our customers are really asking for. Because you can buy cars all day long cheap, but they bring them back to your lot and they're going to just sit there and they're going to get aged and they're going to start losing money because your cost of holding that vehicle on your lot is preventing you from buying that other car that you can sell faster and potentially make more margin. And then you're going to have to start spiffing your sales folks to go out there and start getting rid of that aged inventory on your lot. So it's becoming really a challenge to navigate through all those vehicles and be able to really walk away from the car that doesn't make sense because not every single vehicle that you used to sell in the past is the right vehicle for you today. So when do you walk away and when do you get stuck with a vehicle saying you're overpaying for a vehicle and you're bringing it back to your lot and really not knowing what to do with it? So how do we get better and how do we get through that challenge? It's really having two different styles of dealers. It's really having a look harder dealer, that person that's going out there and researching more, looking through harder, or the look smarter dealer. So those are two common characteristics that I would like to explore a little further and go through what does that mean to look harder and look smarter. So if we take the first one, and really understand what does a look harder dealer do. Those dealers are the ones I mentioned earlier. Those are the ones that are really relying on their past behavior, on their knowledge of cars, on the knowledge of being able to understand what cars they know they're selling better on their lots, what cars they are seeing that are passing through. So by basically relying on experience and instinct. And they're basically doing the same thing that they used to do before because it's worked for them and it's going to continue to work for them potentially. So they are going to spend those 40 plus hours going through and researching. They are going to go into that auction on the day before to walk the lot, to scan those VINs as they see a car that looks in pretty good shape, to see what they can do with this vehicle. Does it make sense for them? Do they want this vehicle? Do they not? So they're really going to spend a lot more time now with the increase of supply. They're going to have to, if they were spending 2-3 hours walking a lot on pre-sale, they're going to have to spend 4 to 5 hours. So really spend more time in the lanes. They're going to spend more time looking at these vehicles, running vehicle history reports, trusting the vehicle history reports, as somebody else mentioned earlier, that they're having a hard time finding the right detail in these vehicles to be able to understand, does this vehicle make sense for me? Does it make sense for my dealership? Does it make sense for my customer base? So they're going to spend a lot more time and energy and potentially walk away with less vehicles because they're going to go into these lanes or whatever they are and spending all this time and energy. They say, I want to buy these 10 cars or 5 cars or whoever they want to go, but they're going to walk into the lanes and they're potentially going to get outbid or somebody else is going to be overpaying for these vehicles. And they're going to step back and start thinking, I spent all this energy and all this time to buy this vehicle and now I'm going to have to I need something for my lot. So they're going to be settling for a less desirable vehicle that they're going to bring home, and they're going to potentially overpay for it, or then they bring it back to their lot and it's going to sit there and get aged because nobody wants that car. But they've spent all that time and energy that they can't just walk away with nothing. So they feel like they have to come back with something. And that's going to create a risk for them to not necessarily spend the money on the right place, and that's going to definitely sacrifice their gross. So on the other side, what do look smarter dealers do? The look smarter dealers are really going to use their instincts. It's going to be their core, because you cannot trade that for anything in the market. But they're going to sharpen their toolkits with more data. And they're going to really go over the vehicle metrics, to the vehicles, the number that comes around with a deal. They're going to still look at the condition. They're still going to look at the grade. They're going to look at the pictures and so forth. But somehow you could say that the behavior changes a little bit. The intent is going to move towards looking at data that comes with the deal, rather than just focusing on the physical aspect of the vehicle. So they're going to say, does this make sense? Do the numbers make sense from this vehicle? Does my reconditioning cost make sense for this vehicle? Are they going to look at, not only looking at the vehicle that are around the corner, they're going to potentially start looking outside of their comfort zone and outside of their radius, to see, is there a better deal across this couple states outside? Can I get this deal cheaper somewhere else because there's a huge influx of inventory? Because I can get it somewhere else potentially for $2,000-3,000 cheaper, and by the time I bring it back, it makes more sense. Also, they can be able to leverage data and understanding what is in the market to try to satisfy their customer base. If the customer walks in and says, I am looking for this vehicle, and the dealer doesn't have that vehicle on their lot, they'll quickly be able to know they can get that vehicle for that customer within a day or 2 days, because they know where those vehicles are, or they have the data at their fingertips that they can look it up right away and say, Mr. Customer, I don't have this car for you today, but if you come back tomorrow in 2 days, I will have it here for you. So they're becoming more effective and efficient in the process of how they're looking for the vehicle, how are they identifying those right vehicles. But not only that, they're adding in the numbers on top of that. So what does that really look like from a checklist perspective, or how does that make sense? So they're really optimizing every single bid. They're making every single purchase, or every single point of going into an auction or logging in online through a simulcast or something, make sure that it's calculated and it's being supported by the right numbers. They're having concrete data to support every single transaction that they're making, in the sense that they know exactly how much profit they're making on the front end. Before they even buy the car, they understand how much they're going to retail the vehicle for, how much money they're going to put into that vehicle to make it retail ready, if any, because they know exactly what the market is demanding from pricing, understanding what is the price to market for this vehicle, what are my competition pricing the same exact vehicle for, and are the consumers looking for that vehicle? So they're going to reflect on the cost to acquire the vehicle, look at the total cost of ownership of that vehicle before they even place their first bid. But more importantly, is they're going to understand what is their max bid on this vehicle. They're going to know the numbers to know what makes sense for them as far as going up to a certain point. They're going to know what their ceiling is for that vehicle. So they don't go in and get swooped into the emotion of bidding on this vehicle, and then they see somebody, their competitor, trying to outbid them on this vehicle, but they'll know they have the discipline to walk away, to say, you know, I don't need this vehicle because I know there's 3 other vehicles similar to this coming on the auction tomorrow or even today, that I can walk away comfortably from this vehicle with no emotion, because I have the data and the metrics behind it that make sense for me. And they're also going to be able to understand if there's a trade-off between the front-end gross and opportunity to retail the vehicle. So potentially, you know, not every vehicle is going to be the moneymaker, but if you need that vehicle to make your customer happy, you're going to be able to make that trade-off, to understand that, you know what, I might not make the gross on this vehicle today, but I know I'm going to satisfy this customer that might go out there and generate me 2 or 3 other customers that I will make my gross on that. So they're becoming more calculated to try to understand what the trade-off is. But the most important thing is that they're understanding how much is it cost to market metric for this vehicle. What is the market day supply for this vehicle that I'm going to bring down to my lot and sell, because I'm investing my money into this vehicle, and I want to make sure I have a return on my investment as fast as possible. because I cannot afford for this vehicle to sit on my lot for 40, 50, 60 days, because based on the supply that's going out there, I need to turn this vehicle much faster so I can go out there and maybe get 2 more that will make me that front end gross that I need to make my month or to make my year. But you always have to allow a little room for instinct and opportunity, because as I mentioned earlier, knowing what car you need and knowing what car makes sense for you, it cannot replace it with data. So you can afford to go and venture and buy that fun car that you know you want, or you potentially want to bring back to your lot, because you know you're making money on the other cars that you bought, that you can afford to take a risk on this car and see if it sticks or not. But it's really becoming more focused and more disciplined.
So, Maj, if I may ask, how do you see this playing out?
Well, if I had a crystal ball in my hand and be able to take a look at it, I can make a couple of small predictions and a couple more things to truly summarize it all in there. Then we know that the increase in supply and value and volatility in the pricing of the vehicle, it's going to make it even much harder to buy the right car. And more importantly, is knowing how much to pay for that. So really having to rely on not only instinct, but using data to truly become more predictive. We've seen that coming into the retail world. We've seen Amazon, how they become predictive. Every time I log into my Amazon account, I see recommendations come up every single time. So people like me, or based on my past behavior, or based on my past purchases, these are the cool things that you should look at that make sense for you. So are we going to have more predictive analytics appear in vehicles? Same thing, market day supply. Basically, consumers in your area, in your geographic area, or nationwide are looking at these kind of vehicles. Maybe you should be also, if you haven't been looking at them there. So becoming more of a recommendation-driven engine, sort of like an Amazon and a Netflix. On the other side is really these dealers are, some of the dealers are looking for efficiency and profitability. So they're saying, does it make sense for me to spend time to bring a vehicle back to my shop and have it reconditioned? Does it make sense? Am I eating into the capacity of my service shop based on the things that they could do for retail? Because now I'm having them recondition a vehicle. So a lot of these things, as we've seen, get published, is the Manheim-Sonic relationship, where Sonic basically goes to Manheim and says, these are the vehicles I need. I need 100 vehicles. I want them to be retail ready, and these vehicles are appearing on their lots, retail ready, reconditioned, detailed, ready to go. So these dealers are not wasting any time by having a car in their service shop for 2 to 5 days. As soon as the car appears on their lot, it's retail ready, it's on their lot ready, if not having a customer already purchase this vehicle. So they're looking for efficiency and looking for ways to become more profitable by cutting down their overhead costs, cutting down their fixed ops expenses, and they're focusing more on the front end profit. And also, our prediction will be based on what we've seen so far and based on some of the trends of we've seen the past 3 to 5 years. There's going to be continued pressure on making that front end gross. It's going to be continued pressure on making sure that we have efficiency in our operations, from overhead, from expenses, from anything that happens, make sure that we continue to make that front end gross and making the margins that we really want. So that's going to drive us to become more reliant on technology. We have to use data to empower us to be prepared for the future. We have to be able to embrace what the world is offering us today to make sure that we are ready for a brighter tomorrow. So really stepping back and asking everybody on this call is like, what is your game plan today? How is your game plan going to change based on what you've seen so far to make sure that you are here tomorrow, and not only here tomorrow, but more profitable, and be able to weather the storm that's going to come at us, and to make sure that we survive and really make that growth that we all plan for.
All right, thank you, Maj. And we are going to transition into our live Q&A. Let me go ahead then and look to our first question coming in from Bill, and that is, how can I tell what my front-end gross will be if I haven't even acquired the car?
That's a great question, Bill. That comes back to having that game plan, Bill, is really understanding what is the retail, what's the price to market for that vehicle. Is understanding how many vehicles are out there similar to this for sale today, and understanding what they're retailing for. And then you have to back into it. It's taking, so for example, you say, I can sell this car for $9,000. So you have to back into how much money am I going to put into reconditioning this vehicle? How much money is it going to cost me in transportation costs to bring this vehicle back to my lot? How am I going to purchase a PSI? I'm going to do a deal shield. Am I going to do anything else to this vehicle? What's my pack? What's my auction fees? Is really backing into all those numbers to try to understand this is exactly how much I can afford to pay for this car in wholesale, because I have to do this X, Y, and Z to be able to bring it to retail ready and hope that I retail it for that amount. So it's really reverse engineering in a sense, is really thinking through what you're going to sell it for before you even buy it, but thinking through every single variable that goes into you having a car retail ready.
Okay, this one from Robert is asking, is there a viable strategy for purchasing used vehicles when a new car manufacturer requires the purchase of X amounts of their off-lease vehicles to satisfy their CPO requirements? And I'm happy to repeat that if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Okay, so looking for a viable strategy for purchasing used vehicles, specifically when the new car manufacturer requires the purchase of X amount or a certain amount of their off-lease vehicles in order to satisfy CPO requirements.
That's a great one. So Robert, that part of the strategy is, again, goes back to data and understanding what the market day supply for the vehicles are coming off lease, because you are going to have to satisfy a certain amount coming in, but you'll be able to pick and choose which ones you want to keep on your lot and which ones you can go in there, because you are going to have to take those cars back no matter what. But you have a decision at that point, after you take those vehicles back, which ones do you keep and which ones do you know they're not going to worth it and you're going to wholesale. So that's where the data comes into play, and that's where it becomes more effective to understand the metrics, and as I mentioned earlier, because you can pick and choose which cars to keep, which cars to sell. And hopefully the ones that you keep, you'll be able to make up some gross on it that will offset some of the loss that you will from wholesaling those vehicles. So it's just trying to understand how to balance your portfolio and making sure that not every single car you take back from the off-lease program you get to keep, because you do have a choice to get rid of them.
All right. Next question here from Rebecca. And Rebecca's asking, the market changes constantly. What can be the best way to determine what to buy?
That's a great question, Rebecca, and you are 100% correct. Market changes every single day, if not every single minute and hour. So it goes back again to understanding what is the market demand, what are some of those metrics that I mentioned earlier, market day supply, what are the consumers looking for today? What are some of the cars that are hot that I need to go out there and get today? Because what's hot today is not going to be tomorrow. If you have a subcompact car, for example, on your lot today, that's not hot. The hot cars are SUVs and crossovers or trucks. Of course, we all know that. But understanding how that shifts and having data to help you drive that is the best way to do that, and have that be part of your game plan. Because then you can evaluate what's on your lot and making sure that these cars, even though I just bought them or somebody just bought them last week, nobody's going to come buy these. So you can make it a better decision. Do I wholesale these vehicles? Do I give them to somebody else? What's my strategy to get rid of these vehicles so I can bring in the hot cars that are needed today? The only way you can do that is having relevant tools at your fingertips that will tell you that information. Because if you try to do it on your own, it's going to drive you nuts, because there's so many resources out there that who has the time to go out there and gather all that information? So really you have to use technology to enable that.
All right, thank you. Jose's question, can you elaborate on efficiency of time to market when purchasing from auction without walking the line?
So it goes back to, again, understanding how do you organize what's available to be sold at the auction? How do you understand which cars really make more sense at that point in time? It's not condition and mileage anymore. You really have to start considering color. Is this the right color in the car? Because there's premiums on colors now, and versus back in the day it used to be all white or green or black. Now you have a premium for a color that's desirable in the market versus a car that's not. So really sifting through those being able to filter through systematically and only deliver the vehicles that make sense for your specific lot, to be able to sift through all that information. So becoming more organized and really honing in what are the key attributes in looking at a vehicle that makes sense for you. Because what makes sense for your market might not make sense for other people's market.
All right. Question here from Ben. Is there any software or applications we could use to better increase our chances for better inventory at lower prices, equaling bigger profits?
Ben, I couldn't have put this question better myself. So being a little reliant here, it's of course there is. vAuto has a wonderful product called StockWave that does exactly what you just mentioned. It really helps you understand which cars are relevant, which cars are not, be able to organize and be able to understand what is your cost before you even buy the car. But there are other tools out there. I don't think anybody's as robust as we are, of course, but there are tools out there, and I'm going to stick with the StockWave. I think it's really, really phenomenal tool that is really revolutioning how wholesale transactions are occurring today, and it's going to be even more beneficial to have some a similar robust tool in the future to help us keep efficiency and organization top of mind.
All right. Question here from Chris. What is the best data source to predict future consumer demand?
The best one that I know of, Chris, again goes back to looking at that is market day supply, and that is a metric that comes from the provision tool of vAuto. And the market day supply is a very powerful metric that truly tells you which cars are relevant in the market today and potentially predict which cars are needed if you don't have them today. Other than going out there and really sifting through retail data to see what cars are selling yourself, you need to have technology to be able to empower that, and there are tools out there, but the market day supply metric I believe is the best one so far to truly help you understand what is relevant in your market today.
All right, just going to pause here a moment, Maj. If you want to take a sip of water, let folks know you're welcome to continue entering questions. We do have a queue going here, but want to give you a moment to take a breath.
Thank you.
All right, I do have a question here from Wayne, and my biggest challenge is, and I'm not sure if you say NADA or NADA, but my biggest challenge is NADA is not keeping up with values, making LTVs not in line for numerous vehicles, even harder for a non-franchise store who doesn't get the certified NADA retail value bump. So
Wayne, that's a challenge for sure, and that's going to continue to change as retail values fluctuate and understanding what is going to be a residual value. I wish I had a magic crystal ball to tell you how that's going to change. All I'm saying is that I think having that true understanding of the demand in the market and how much money you have into that vehicle, that would really help you understand what the LTV values are going to be or try to predict it. You have to rely on different sources. You can't just take NADA values. You have to use other valuations out there, our book, Kelley Blue Book, and so forth to try to triangulate and try to come up with the best guess. But there's no easy way, unfortunately, to do that unless you use different data points to try to hone in on that right value.
Okay. Sean's question, with front-end gross shrinking, is sales velocity more important now?
Sean, 100%. Goes back to the earlier point. You cannot afford to invest your money in a vehicle that is going to sit there for 60, 70 days on your lot. You be able to make that money that you used to make, you have to turn fast. Your turns have to increase. And that is your best way to continue to make the profits, because you're not going to make per vehicle the same profits that you did. But if you can turn that vehicle 2-3 times more a month, you're going to make that money. You're going to make that gross, if not more. So velocity is 100% at top of mind, and to be able to have that velocity and be able to increase your turns, you have to buy the car right, and you have to make sure that you can walk away from those bad deals, because again, you can't afford to have a car sit on your lot anymore unless you have a lot of money that you can invest in an inventory that can sit and get aged on your lot.
All right. Question here from Jack. Are there tools to project cost and profit?
Yes, there are tools to project cost and profit. Again, I'll reference back StockWave that has a business plan aspect that will force you to look at the cost and profit per vehicle. If not, then you would have to use create your own tools or use Excel or use a spreadsheet or use something that you'll know. But it's very important to understand exactly what is going into every single vehicle before you purchase a vehicle. If you're not doing it today, you have to do that tomorrow. You can't just buy a vehicle and then bring it back to your lot and understand, well, I'm only going to spend X on reconditioning, or I'm going to do this to this vehicle to that. You have to have all the variables on hand before you even buy the vehicle, because you cannot afford to make a mistake. You could, but it's going to cost you a lot of money.
All right. This is a kind of a comment or addition to Wayne's previous question regarding NADA values, and Wayne's just saying not using NADA values for purchasing, but the banks do.
That's a good point, Wayne. Thank you. You're correct. Unfortunately, that's when it comes to the point of having a good floor plan company that's going to work with you, that understands that NADA values are not necessarily set in stone and there are different variables. So I can't really offer recommendations in that aspect, but I do recommend that you would potentially look at other ways to finance your deals other than a bank, potentially finding an independent, pretty reliable floor plan company to help you with that.
Okay. Another question here from Sam. How can I compete in the lanes with a buyer who always are willing to overpay?
Sam, well, that's you can compete, because the reason those buyers are overpaying, there's a reason for them to overpay for the vehicle. In your mind, they are overpaying, but for them, they're not potentially, because they know exactly how much money they're going to retail the vehicle for, and they potentially already know exactly who the buyer is for that vehicle. So from my perspective, it looks like they're overpaying. From their perspective, they're just getting a good deal on a vehicle because they've already thought of all the variables into that car, and they know exactly how much they're going to retail it, and they probably have a profit already aligned for that vehicle. So that's why it goes back to more to having a game plan and be able to walk away, because once the vehicle doesn't make sense to you anymore, you can say, you know what, you can have it, you can overpay for it. But sometimes you will be the one overpaying for that vehicle in other people's eyes, but for you, you're still going to make that gross that you want on that vehicle.
All right, got one here from Tony. How can I hold my buyers accountable to acquiring vehicles that meet my retail gross objective?
Tony, that's a great question, but that's where discipline and metrics come into play. And that's where you have to go back at every single vehicle that you purchase and saying, this was my anticipated. It's like having a budget or having a forecast saying, I want to make $1,000 this month. You always go back and look, did I make the $1,000? If I didn't make the $1,000, what variables came into play that made me overspend or underspend? So that's the only way you can hold your buyers, by saying, having a disciplined buy list for every buyer, telling them how much their bid max is, and hold them accountable to that. And to go back to say, I told you to spend $8,000 on this vehicle because I want to sell it for 10. So you go back and analyze after the vehicle is sold, did you sell it for 10? Why did you not sell it for 10, or why did you sell it for 10? Did your buyer truly spend $8,000 on this vehicle? It's having to go back and revisit every single transaction after the fact as well, as much as it is being prepared in the front. So having scorecards by buyer, understanding how many cars they're buying, how much they're overspending, what is their budget, and holding them accountable to that. And you can do that every week, every month, however frequency you choose to.
Okay, question here from Ben. Where can we learn more about StockWave?
Ben will be more than happy to help you out with that. If you submit part of the question, or give us your email and contact information, we'll have somebody get in touch with you as soon as possible to take you through a demo and show you what the tool does and how it works for you.
Okay, we've got a question here from Terry. What market segments do you think offer the greatest opportunity in months ahead?
Market segments as far as vehicles and which vehicles to get into? Is that what it is, Terry? Just to clarify.
It is, what market segments do you think offer the greatest opportunity in the months ahead?
I wish I had a crystal ball, my friend. I really do. Unfortunately, I need a little bit more research in that as far as that aspect, because that's really getting into the retail world. But I'll be more than happy to send you a response back personally, Terry.
All right. I've got one here. Wait, hold on. My queue is jumping around a little bit. In the meantime, while I'm straightening that out, maybe you want to take a quick breather there, Maj, get some water. While the questions continue in. Okay, I've got one here. Let's see. Yep, one here from Diego. And that is, what vehicle type do I buy that will require minimum reconditioning and maintain the most profit possible?
That's a great question, Diego. First of all, I would have to understand what market you are in and what your client base is like. But to just kind of give you a generic question is really understanding how much money, what your customers are demanding. Are they demanding cars that are perfect to be able to say, I need to spend a little extra time reconditioning these vehicles? Again, Diego, based on what I shared with you earlier, you're going to have a huge selection of newer cars coming into the market today that you'll be able to buy cheaper than ever, and they're going to have low mileage. And the whole concept of that is that these cars are going to be taken care of, so you'll be able to buy these cars much cleaner and much cheaper than you ever did before. So reconditioning could potentially definitely go down, but you really have to focus in what's your demand for that, what your customer walking into your lot is asking for, and really knowing that not based on what you did before, but what they're looking for today, because that changes every single day.
Okay, another question here. Can you pinpoint and identify some of the necessary dealer tools, for example, VIN scanners or floor plans, etc.?
Definitely, I think having a tool that really helps you with valuation of a vehicle is number one. It's really understanding evaluation of what's the vehicle's worth, how much did you pay for it, how much is people selling for it. So having a relevant tool like that is, I think it's very, very relevant, very important. The VIN scanner, it depends what the VIN scanner does for you. The VIN scanner, you need to be able to pull in different data points to be able to help you. Somebody else mentioned earlier in the webinar through the Q&A or through the polls is that you can't rely on vehicle history reports alone to make sure that this vehicle makes sense. So you want to make sure you bring different data points in with that VIN scanner that will be able to make you a decision on that. So definitely having something on hand, but that's a little too late because that's something you do when you're in the auction. You have to have some research beforehand. You have to be able to create a game plan before you even walk in and having that VIN scanner. So doing research is more important. Understanding what cars are relevant in the market are more important, and understanding how much to pay for those are really important.
Okay, looks like we have time for one more question I have here. When dealers, quote unquote, look smarter, how much less time do they typically spend researching, and what kind of front-end gross improvement do they see?
So that's a great question. Based on the limited research that we have, and it's still very early in the stages that we've had, but the number one thing that I have seen so far is the decline in time researching. So as I mentioned earlier, I think on average they're spending about 40 hours a week researching for the vehicles before they even in preparation for the sale day the next week. So what we've seen so far initially from the Look Smarter dealers is they're having about a 75% decline in time. So that's a huge amount of time that they have back in their day to be able to sell more cars, to be able to understand what the customers are doing, more customer satisfaction, focus on their employees. So the 75% reduction is huge. As far as front-end gross, it depends on that disciplined dealer. But again, very early indication are showing us that it's about 15 to 25% improvement in gross. Again, early statistics, but that's what some of the behavior that we're seeing come through from those Look Smarter dealers.
All right. Well, looks like we're getting toward the top of the hour. Before I do wrap, Maj, anything that you would like to leave our audience with before we wrap up?
Definitely. First of all, thank you for taking the time out on a Friday to listen, and I hope that you've been able to glean some nuggets of information from what I was able to share. But also, I would want to focus in on those 25% folks that started off the conversation that was saying they haven't changed their behavior, is to really go back and hopefully revisit that, because if you're doing the same thing that you did previously, it's going to become even more of a challenge to continue to survive in the future. So I would ask for every single person to truly go back and rethink how are they doing business today and try to figure out how they can become more effective and efficient in the future. And I wish every single person all the best, and I hopefully have a good weekend.
All right, and folks, before we do sign off, thank you to each of you for joining us, and trust that you found today to be of value. Special thanks to you, Majd Saboura, as well as the sponsor for today, vAuto. And most importantly, thanks again for joining. This is Lori Dearman saying have a great rest of the week. Bye for now.